All right, folks, we've talked about scope before. The scope of a variable is where that variable is valid. And I'll show you an example. Just a second. So you might be thinking, well, I got a variable. Wouldn't it be valid everywhere? Well, let's take a look. Here's a little snippet of code. We got a for loop. I goes from 0 up to 4. And we're printing out I. And then when the loop's over, I'm trying to print out I again. So you should be able to see that there's something wrong with this right now. But we can always try to compile, and then it'll tell us. It says on this line right here, it doesn't know what we mean by I. And you're like, well, frick, it's right here. It's right here. It's I, no big deal. But here's the thing. When you do a for loop and you declare the variable right here, that variable is only valid inside of that for loop. So if you wanted access to the value of I afterwards, you'd have to make a variable ahead of time. Like we can do that. We could say int I equals 0 right here. And then right here, we can just say I equals 0. You have to have something there, I'm pretty sure. And then now, when we compile this, it'll compile fine because there's something else down in the file that I didn't fix, so don't worry about that. But this part compiles fine. All right, so I don't recommend doing that with for loops. If you have a for loop and it's just a throwaway variable, you should just have it be a throwaway variable and don't worry about it. Don't try to make it up earlier and then have it be persistent. There's no reason to. If you have a throwaway variable like a for loop variable, just have it be a throwaway variable. Okay. So more along the lines of classes, what we're talking about today, I've made a class here called a thing. And there's a method that does something to a thing, and then we print out the thing. So I'm gonna show you the thing class. Here's that code that I just pasted. So here's the class thing. Take a look up here. It's kind of a silly class. It has a private int called num. It doesn't even have a constructor. I told you don't have to have constructors. If you don't do a constructor, then integers are initialized with the value 0. Strings are initialized with the value null or no value. Anyway, this thing called a thing has a num variable, and then we have this a setter method, a mutator method called a, which it makes a variable num and it adds 1 to it. And then we also have this string, toString. So let's go back up here. I'm creating a thing, and then I'm running that add method, and then I'm printing out my thing. So you would think, I think you would think that, one sec, I have to make this compile. I would think, well, let's just see what happens when we run this. I guess I'm missing a little piece of code. Should be okay here. No. Now I'm pissed. Oh, yeah, right here. Easy. All right, so when I run this, I say make a new thing, and then I run this this little method that modifies the variable num, and then I print out the thing. We get 0. Now, kind of seems like we did call this method here, and we did num plus plus. So why isn't num when we print it out? Why isn't it 1? Why is it still 0? Can you?
Because that variable is in the loop.
Yeah, exactly. So this is an example of scope inside of a method. See, we have int num equals 8, and then num plus plus. That creates a new variable, a local variable we could call it. This variable num right here is only valid from here to here, and then it's over. So it'd be kind of silly to do this, but it's a way to test whether you understand what's going on. If we wanted this to affect the main class variable, the attribute, we get rid of this int declaration, and then we should probably always get 9 when we run the code. Yeah, we're getting 9 because when you run this void a, it sets num to 8 because it was 0 by default, and then we add 1 to it, and then we're good. So just to write out the details here, 3 things to know about scope with methods. Number 1, local variables can be declared. All right, 3 things. So it's a little bit obscure, but it's important for you to know what scope is. I'd say most of the time you don't run into this problem. But it would, if you make more complicated programs, certainly would happen. So local variables can be declared in the body of constructors and methods. These variables can only be used in the scope where they were created. 2, parameters declared in a method or constructor header can only be accessed inside of that method or constructor. And then finally, when there is a local variable with the same name as a class variable, the instance variable, if you use the variable name, it's referring to the local one. So I'll show you an example, and I'll put this back up in a sec. But I did make, after this thing class, I made a student class. Let's see if I think I'm missing part of it. Yeah, just got deleted. We're not doing this anymore. So here's a student class. If I say private string first name, private string last name, there's a big problem here. You wouldn't use the variable names first name and last name in the constructor header. That just creates a new variable with the same name. And then if you come in here and say first name equals first name, if you ever find yourself saying, oh, this variable equals itself, and then you're like, okay, Mr. Trace told me I shouldn't be doing that. This variable has to be something different. So, you can say first and last, and then you would use them here. But but you can't have the same variable name. And if you did, like for example, if we did this right here, string first name equals first, that's great, but it creates a local variable that's local just to the constructor called first name, and it stores when you created the student object, it stores information there, but then it's just thrown away. It doesn't affect this one up here. That one would be null. It would just be sitting there like nobody ever, hey, you never told me what to put in here, I'm going to leave it at nothing. So anyway, don't keep track of where you're declaring your variables. You do private string first name, private string last name up top, so then you don't have to declare them down here inside. Any questions? All right.